The Galaxy's most advanced fleet surrendered because one human ship refused to die. The Terran destroyer, unyielding, floated through the emptiness like a stricken whale, spewing atmosphere and wreckage into the stellar blackness. Captain Sarah. Chen held her hand against the emergency bulkhead and could feel the shudders of secondary blasts run through what was left of her ship's structural members. The gravity was gone for 3 hours now, and her crew drifted in a hellworld of arcing conduits and sheared metal. "Hull breach on Deck 7, announced Lieutenant Marcus Webb, his voice breaking up on the broken comm system. "That's the third one in the past 10 minutes. Chen propelled herself up the corridor handholds, moving towards the bridge through smoke-thick air and the acrid flavor of reused oxygen running perilously low. Through the broken viewport ahead, she could spot them. The hegemony fleet. 300 ships drawn up in flawless geometric array, their black hulls shining with some unearthly glow that was painful to gaze directly upon. The unyielding was alone. The rest of the Terran defense fleet had been vaporized in the opening. Minutes of what the brass had called a Chen almost laughed at the bitter irony. They'd sent 12 ships to investigate reports of alien activity in the Kepler system. Only her destroyer remained, and it was held together by little more than emergency patches and sheer bloody-mindedness. "Captain," said Chief Engineer Elena. Vasquez's voice evenly through the intercom, hardly heard above the whine of battered machinery. "I'm good for approximately 20 minutes worth of life support, and that's if we relax a little on the breaths." He arrived on the bridge to find her crew remaining in their seats, though a number were injured by impact wounds suffered when the artificial gravity had gone offline. Navigation Officer David Park had a jagged wound across his brow that he'd sealed with ripped material from his uniform. Weapons Officer Jessica Kumar was drifting upside down with respect to her console, hands flying across holographic interfaces that fluttered and risked shutting down with every power surge. "Status report," she directed, taking a handhold and facing the main tactical display. "We're on backup power alone," Park announced, removing blood from his eyes. "Main engines are lost, maneuvering thrusters at 15%. The quantum drive's dead." Addressing Kumar's expression was grim. "Port battery is space junk. Starboard battery has 2 functional plasma cannons out of 8. Missile tubes are empty, and we've got exactly 47 rounds left for the railguns." Chen studied the tactical display, showing the hegemony formation. Each enemy vessel was easily 4 times the size of a human dreadnought, bristling with weapon systems that defied current understanding of physics. They moved with an eerie synchronization, like schools of predatory fish responding to some collective consciousness. "Intermittent," answered Communications Officer Timothy Rodriguez. "The primary array was knocked out in the initial exchange, but I was able to jury-rig something using the emergency beacon transmitters." Chen nodded, working arithmetic. 47 railgun rounds against 300 enemy spacecraft. Mathematically, it was inconceivable, but mathematics had never stopped humankind before. She looked at the colony's billions of inhabitants, who had no idea whatever that a first contact was happening with an alien civilization, and that it was going extremely badly indeed. "All hands," she declared on the PA system, her voice ringing through compartments full of floating wreckage. An emergency illumination. "All hands, this is the captain. I'm not going to lie to you. We're outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed by an enemy that just showed us they can annihilate our entire fleet and not even lose a step. Our air's gone bad, our ammo's almost gone, and we have no way out." She stopped, gazing into the faces of her bridge crew. Young faces, for the most part. Park was hardly 25. Kumar had just gone lieutenant 6 months prior. They deserved better than to die out here in the middle of nowhere, waging war against an enemy they could never win against. "But," she continued, her voice hardening with resolve, "we are still here. We are still fighting. And as long as we draw a breath, the hegemony will know that humanity does not go gentle into that good night." Through the forward viewport, the alien fleet began to move. Not toward them, they were clearly beneath notice now, a crippled gnat buzzing around the edges of their formation. The hegemony ships were accelerating toward the inner system, toward the jump gate that would take them to human space, toward Earth. Captain Rodriguez shouted, "I'm receiving signals from the alien fleet." "It's in English." Chen felt her blood chill. "Put it through." The bridge speakers came on with a voice unmistakably mechanical. Every word enunciated with robotic clarity. "Attention, primitive vessels of the species. Designation human. Your military resources have been assessed and found wanting. Resistance is without sense. Prepare for incorporation into the hegemony. Your biological uniqueness will be retained where appropriate." The transmission was cut off, with just hum of dying life support and the occasional spark where consoles had been damaged. Chen gazed at the tactical display, where the hegemony fleet just kept on rolling towards the jump gate. In 6 hours, human space. In 12 hours, Earth orbit. They learned our language, Park had whispered, studied our transmissions, our culture. It wasn't a matter of first contact. This was them measuring us up before the kill. Chen shut her eyes briefly, her mind on her daughter, back on Luna Station. Emma was 7 years old, gap-toothed and precocious, with aspirations to be a xenobiologist. The irony was not lost on her that Emma could get her shot at seeing non-human life forms earlier rather than later, although inevitably not exactly the way she had planned. Chief Vasquez called out Chen on the intercom. "How much longer can the railguns be kept powered?" "It's an hour if we close everything else," was the response. "But Captain, with respect, what's the purpose? We have 47 rounds and 300 ships. The point," Chen said, "is that they'll remember us." She looked at Kumar, aimed for the lead ship. "All power to railguns." "Cupid's darts," objected Kumar. "Even if we lose one ship, the rest." "Will what? Kill us." Chen's laugh was sharp and bitter. "We're already dead, Lieutenant. So the question is whether we die whimpering or die fighting." Kumar's hands fluttered across her console and the reticle on the primary display. Engage the biggest hegemony ship, a gargantuan construct that appeared to warp light around its curves. Target locked up, railguns powering up. The unrelenting shuddered as her last railguns fired, casting twin streams of hastened tungsten missiles across the emptiness at a sizable piece of light speed. The enemy fleet failed even to lose speed. The missiles hit the lead ship's shields and just disappeared, getting eaten up without a twitch in the enemy ship's power output. "Hit untouched," noted Kumar. "They didn't even see us." But Chen was reading the tactic display more closely. The hegemony formation had adjusted slightly, nothing to do with the attack, but for the maintenance of their optimum geometric formation. They were a well-organized, well-disciplined team following some kind of routine. That meant that they had regulations, procedures, possible weaknesses. "Fire again," she ordered. "I said fire." Another blast ripped out of the unyielding. The same effect. No harm, no seeming impact. Yet once more, the formation adjusted on a microscopic scale to preserve its configuration. Chen was getting a glimpse into something essential about their foes. These people were perfectionists, fixated on order and effectiveness. Each ship precisely where it was supposed to be. Every action planned and deliberate. Rodriguez, she called out, "Can you hack into their communications network?" "I'm not sure, Captain. It's a different encryption than I'm familiar with, but perhaps if I do it, whatever it takes." Rodriguez worked wildly on his console, and Chen kept giving the orders for attack. Each shot was useless, each bullet a waste, but she was learning. The hegemony fleet reacted neither to threat individually nor as a group, but rather as a body. When she attacked a single ship, others changed positions to keep the body integral. They were acting as a single mind, which could be the same weakness as a single mind. "Got something," Rodriguez suddenly declared. "Can't understand much of it. The streams of data are vastly sophisticated, but I'm reading what could be command protocols. It's as if they're continually informing one another on status, location, tactical analysis. Can you disrupt it? No disruption, but maybe I can be part of it. There was a shiver of hope for the first time since the war started for Chen. Explain. If I can input false information into their network, lead them to believe there are dangers where there aren't, or that their shape is illegitimate tip could induce them to disrupt their pattern. Do it. As Rodriguez worked, Chen ordered continued attacks, using their dwindling ammunition to probe the enemy formation. Each shot revealed more about how they operated, how they thought. The hegemony wasn't just militarily superior, they were mentally superior, processing information and coordinating actions at a level beyond human capability. But that coordination was also their vulnerability. Almost got it, Rodriguez muttered, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. I'm piggybacking on their sensor updates, making it look like we've got a massive fleet hiding in the asteroid field. The bridge held its breath as Rodriguez began his program. Nothing occurred for a moment. Then, and immediately, the ideal hegemony formation trembled. Ships started changing course, some gaining speed, some losing it, as they reacted to phantom dangers that existed only within their collective consciousness. It's working, Park exclaimed. They're breaking formation. But the attack only lasted 4 seconds. The ships of the hegemony soon caught on that they had been tricked and fell back into their original positions, their formation even tighter than before. Worse, some ships broke away from the group and started moving towards the unyielding. Incoming, declared Kumar. 3 ships, destroyer class. They're finally taking us serious. The incoming ships on the tactical screen made Chen uneasy. Was still a few times larger than her own ship. And what remaining weaponry she had was going to be just as good as pelting a tank with rocks. Yet she'd learned something indispensable out of the ruckus. The hegemony could be deceived, for a short time at least. They put stock in the collective information network they shared. They trusted it instinctively. That was something she could exploit. Chief Vasquez. She called out on the intercom. I want you to overload our reactor, sir. That'll ruin the boat. Not immediately. Can you create a cascade failure that builds over time? There was a silence before Vasquez answered. Perhaps. If I short the safety interlocks and dump the reaction chamber with plasma, yes, I could stage it as a power buildup. But once it begins, it can't be stopped. How long would we have? 30 minutes? Possibly 40 if we're fortunate. Chen looked among her crew. They looked back at her with fear and hope, thinking that she could somehow get them out of the horror. The face of Emma came before her mind once more. The billions of human beings who died if human space was discovered by the hegemony fleet. Do it, she directed. As Vasquez began her sabotage of their own reactor, Chen turned to Rodriguez. I need you to broadcast our reactor signature on all frequencies. Make it look like we're charging some kind of super weapon. That's not a bad idea, responded Rodriguez, his fingers flying across his console. If we dial the output just the right way, it could look like we're building towards a big conclusion. The 3 hegemony destroyers were closing rapidly, their guns already accelerating. Chen could see power gathering along their hulls like imprisoned lightning, which was going to take the unyielding apart into its constituent atoms. But they too were breaking, becoming more prudent than they had been during the slaughtering initial approach. They're scanning us, Kumar stated. Several deep scans, as if they're trying to determine what we're up to. Good Chen pushed the ship-wide intercom button for the second time. All hands, the captain speaking. Final protocol beginning. I need all crew members to buckle themselves into their stations. Whatever happens to us the next couple of minutes, do not abandon your positions. We're the species' final stand, and we're going to make it count. Through the corridors of the dying ship, men and women who had joined the service to explore the stars instead, prepared to die fighting an enemy they'd never imagined could exist. In engineering, Alina Vasquez welded herself to her console, literally. fusing the metal of her restraints to ensure she couldn't be thrown clear when the ship started coming apart. In gunnery control, teams did the same, turning themselves into human components of their weapon systems. Reactor building toward critical, Vasquez reported. The cascade is accelerating faster than I calculated. We might have 20 minutes, not 30. The hegemony annihilators had halted their advance, remaining fixed just outside what they most likely estimated the kill zone for whatever weaponry they assumed the humans were rushing. Chen could view them on the TAC display, their ideal formations, broken up by doubt. Rodriguez plugged me into their communication system. Sir, you heard me? I want to talk with them. Rodriguez worked busily, and after a moment or two, nodded. You're on. They'll listen to whatever you have to say. Chen breathed deeply, recalling every war film she had ever seen, every tale of hopeless last stands and glorious sacrifice. She recalled the Alamo Thermopylae. Every moment in the history of humankind when a handful of individuals had opposed hopeless odds, not because they could possibly win, but because someone had to attempt it. Attention Hegemony Fleet, she began, her voice carrying through the emptiness to 300 extraterrestrial warships. Terran Defense Force Destroyer Unyieldings, Captain Sarah Chen, speaking. You have estimated our military power and found it wanting. You have judged resistance makes no sense. You are mistaken. She stopped and observed the alien ships changing their position, unsure what to make of the surprising communication. You have made the fundamental error in your perception of humankind. You have mistook our technology for our strength, our weapons for our will. You're going to discover what we're really capable of. The reactor was building toward critical now, and Chen could feel the vibrations growing stronger through the ship's hull. Emergency klaxons were sounding throughout the vessel, but her crew remained at their stations, welded in place by choice and circumstance. We are not like you, Chen continued. We do not fight because it is logical. We do not calculate odds and surrender when the mathematics are unfavorable. We fight because it is right. We fight because someone must. And we fight because every moment we keep you here, focused on us, is another moment that word of your existence spreads to every human world, every human fleet, every human heart. The 3 hegemony destroyers had started retreating, their sensors monitoring the increasing power cascade, but unsure what it was. The parent fleet had also changed course a little, some ships moving forward to take a look, while others kept course for the jump gate. You think you know us because you monitored our communications, learned our language, observed our tactics. You understand nothing of the human spirit. Absolutely nothing of what we become when we have nothing left to lose. Chen looked around the bridge one last time. Park was bleeding from a dozen cuts, but still maintaining navigation with no thrust and no proper instruments. Kumar was somehow keeping the targeting systems online despite power fluctuations that deplied Specto by Plux Park. The last ties that should have fried every circuit. Rodriguez had jury-rigged their communications into something that could reach across the galaxy if necessary. In 10 minutes, the ship's going to be blown up, announced Chen. The crew and I will be dead. But our sacrifice will be echoed throughout human space. Each world will know what happened here. Each fleet will be ready. Each human being will know that you can be fought, that you can be held back, that you're not invincible. The reactor was getting near critical mass. Vasquez's voice on the intercom was strained but resolute. 5-minute final cascade, Captain. Whatever you're going to do, do it now. His face set into a scowl. You want our secret weapon? It's not high-tech. It's not a bigger gun. It's the unwashed truth that when our own humanity teeters on the scale, we do not surrender. We do not negotiate. We do not run. We rise, we battle, we die if that's what it takes. But we take a bloody mile for every breath of air, every human soul, every wheeze of our lungs. The unrelenting was breaking up now. bulkheads giving and atmosphere venting through hull tiers that seemed to appear sooner than the sealing parties could cover. Yet her crew held position, welded to consoles, still running systems that should have failed long ago. The word's already gone out, Chen went on, even though she wasn't entirely convinced. Our quantum beacon was triggered the instant you annihilated. Our fleet? Earth's aware. You're on the way. The colonies are aware you're on the way, and they'll be set for what you can't conceive, armed with what you have not seen. Schooled in tactics you have not learned, driven with a resolve you can't understand. She was lying, of course. Their quantum beacon had been destroyed in the first exchange. But the hegemony didn't know that, and their ships were repositioning again. Some peeling off to investigate possible transmission vectors, while others maintained their advance toward the gate. 2 minutes to cascade. Vasquez relayed. Chen keyed the intercom one final time. All hands, it has been an honor serving with you. Remember, we are not dying. We are buying time. We are not losing. We are sending a message. The message that humanity will never surrender, never yield, never stop fighting for what is right. The hegemony destroyers were withdrawing now, retreating to what they estimated was a safe distance away from the incoming explosion. But on the tactical screen, Chen could see the main fleet had divided, some ships pressing on for Earthwhile. Others withdrew to check out the potential quantum transmission. Her ruse was succeeding, at least in part. 1 minute, Vasquez bellowed. The reactor containment is failing. Simultaneous cascade points developing. It's going to be bigger than I estimated. Chen clung to her command chair as the ship shook and convulsed around her. Through the fetal, dying life support, she could hear the crew's litany of prayer. The whispered conversation among women and men expiring on their feet with purpose and dignity. They had given the best they could with the time they had. 30 seconds. All hands, brace for the transmission cut away as secondary explosions started rolling through the hull of the Unyielding. Chen observed her crew labored until the end, Kumar delivering their last railgun shots even as the bridge swamped in plasma, Park holding course changes that no longer applied, Rodriguez transmitting their defiance to whatever human ship should be listening. The Terran destroyer Unyielding perished as she had lived fighting against desperate chances, and refusing to back down even when the end was a certainty. Reactor containment finally relented completely, releasing energies akin to a miniature star exploding into nova. The explosion was observed 12 light-years away. A transient new star that twinkled for just precisely 17 seconds before it disappeared into cosmic background radiation. But 17 seconds was long enough. Retribution's commander, Admiral Marcus Kane, stood on his bridge while he observed the battle plan display screen, which registered the loss of Captain Chen's ship. The Unyielding's demise had registered on the deep space monitoring bases across human space as a result of a quantum burst. And the word was already getting around. It wasn't via the quantum beacon that was the final ruse played by Chun Boot. The hard fact that her ship died for the cause, and that demise had been seen. Signal from High Command, his communications officer proclaimed. All fleets proceed to defensive sites instantly. Alpha priority procedures are being taken. He swallowed hard. Alpha priority meant the species was under extinction-level threat, that every resource, every weapon, every starship was going into the next battle. It meant that the sacrifice of Chen had given them just exactly what she'd promised: time to plan, time to mobilize, time for human space to become a fortress the hegemony would cost dear just to travel through. How long until the enemy reaches the inner systems? Kane asked. At their present speed, roughly 60 hours. But sir, our intelligence estimates indicate they have divided their force. Some ships are checking out what they suspect are quantum transmission points within the outer colonies. Kane smiled bleakly. Even in death, Chen was still battling. Her bluff on the quantum beacon had paid off, compelling the hegemony to split. Their focus second-guessed themselves. Wonder what else the human race had up its sleeve. Good. Signal all vessels. We implement the Chen Protocol. Humans. Each ship fights to the end. No surrender, no retreat, no quarter given or asked. If they desire human space, they buy it with blood. Theirs and ours. Throughout humankind's space, the word ran like wildfire. The hegemony was on its way. They could not be stopped. They could not be defeated. They were perfectly coordinated and overpowering with technology. However, they had made a crucial mistake. They had underestimated what human beings became when their backs were against the wall. In the Kepler system, the wreckage of the unyielding drifted through the stars, a testament to resistance and a foretelling of the struggles still to come. And where she had died, her transmission played on loop, beaming out on automatic emergency beacons that would persist for decades. We stand, we fight, we die if we must. But we make you pay for every inch of space, every human life, every breath of our existence. The hegemony fleet moved into human space, their flawless formations without a taint of doubt or fear. They had estimated the chances, studied human potential, and decided that they could not lose. They were correct, naturally. They had 1,000 to 1. Superiority in numbers, technology which bordered on the magical, and the combined brains of a species which had one half the galaxy. But they had never battled human beings before. Fleet Admiral Alina Rodriguez, there was no connection between her and the communications officer killed on the unyielding stood within the command center far below Luna Station, amidst holographic displays indicating the array of human troops across the solar system. Each ship, every station, every orbital platform was accounted for, as were defensive sites established during the 72 hours since the unyielding's last transmission. "How are the outer colonies?" she inquired. "It's not possible for full evacuation," answered her chief of staff. "But most of the children are out, and whatever survived are armed and waiting. The Centauri colonies are asking for clearance for scorched earth procedures." Rodriguez nodded. Scorched earth meant destroying everything of value before the enemy could capture its infrastructure. Resources, even the colonies themselves, if necessary. It was a doctrine born of desperation. But then again, desperate times called for desperate measures. Granted, what about fleet dispositions? We have our heaviest units concentrated near Earth and the core worlds. But we have our fast attack squadrons deployed all across the outer systems. The idea is to bleed M at every step. Make M fight for every light year. Rodriguez pored over the tactics displays, recalling Captain Chen and her crew. They had given humanity time, but more than that, they had demonstrated just what humankind could do when it didn't take defeat for granted. The Chen Protocol had become doctrine among the entire fleet: no surrender, no retreat, and make the enemy pay heavily for every win. Signal from deep space sensors announced the communications officer. The hegemony fleet has entered the Sol system, ATA to Earth orbital space. 18 hours. Rodriguez's belly nodded up. 18 hours before the end for humanity. Across human space, every ship, every station, every final desperate defense would hold, or humanity would become part of the myriad species that the hegemony had conquered. But they'd go down swinging at least. All fleets, this is Admiral Rodriguez. Implement final defensive positions. Remember the unyielding. Remember Captain Chen. Show them what humans are made of. The hegemony fleet had moved into the solar system like a plague of locusts, their obsidian ships mirroring the distant glow of Sol as they moved in precise formation towards the inner planets. 300 ships had dwindled to 28 after deception on the part of Chen had caused them needlessly to deal with phantom threats. But even smaller numbers, they were a force that could sterilize every world in human space. At the forefront of the formation was the flagship Eternal Dominion, a gargantuan construct which appeared to have a part of its existence outside normal spacetime, its hull wavering under stresses that human science could barely understand. In its command center, the hegemony overmind worked through 1,000 sources of tactical information at once, running calculations and refining strategy with cold mechanical precision. The humans had caught them once with their deception, but once was once too often. The Overmind had dissected every detail of the burned-out ship's final minutes, itemized every tactic, every weapon system, every forlorn gamble. The species code human had been revised in the hegemony records obdurate, irrational, given to self-destroying impulses, but eventually inconsequential. The end was inevitable. The only issue was how many resources it would take. The first battle was Jupiter, where a line of human heavy cruisers had established a line of defense among the gas giant's moons. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The human cruisers fought with the desperate recklessness that was the Unyielding's final stand. But they could just not match up. Plasma beams capable of coring an asteroid had no impact on hegemony shields. Fusion missiles capable of shattering a moon barely managed to scratch their hulls. But the humans didn't run. Even when their ships were coming apart around them, even when life support failed and gravity cut out, they kept fighting. Some captains literally sealed themselves in their command centers and continued issuing orders until the very end. Others rammed their crippled vessels into hegemony ships, hoping to cause damage through sheer kinetic force. It was absurd. It was wasteful. It was grandly, horribly human. The Overmind labored over the battle statistics with growing bewilderment. The human troops were fighting battle after battle to no discernible end, employing tactics which made no sense. There were suffering casualties which should have caused any rational species to surrender, continuing attacks which had no rational hope of success. By the time the hegemony fleet arrived on Mars, they had sunk 47 human ships for the loss of precisely 0 ships on their part. Something was amiss. The attacks were becoming more coordinated, more desperate, and more successful. Successful enough to do real damage? No. But successful enough to require the hegemony to adjust their tactics to react to threats that shouldn't have been threats. The battle raged for 18 hours. The orbital space around the red planet was a cemetery for human ships, their hulls ripped apart and leaking atmosphere into the emptiness. Yet for every ship the hegemony brought down, it was immediately replaced by another, and another, and another. There were human reinforcements streaming in everywhere in the solar system. Ships which had no business defending homeworlds if they were committing themselves to a meat grinder without any conceivable victory. It made no sense. It was contrary to the laws of rational warfare, but it was working. Not in terms of causing casualties. The hegemony had lost exactly 3 ships to human action, and those only because of ramming attacks that sacrificed entire crews to cause minimal damage. But it was working in ways the Overmind couldn't fully quantify. The human resistance was affecting hegemony morale, creating doubt and uncertainty in a force that had conquered star systems without breaking stride. For the first time in 5 centuries of growth, the hegemony confronted an enemy that would not admit defeat. The Eternal Dominion prowled the asteroid belt like a hunting animal, its sensors ranging for the human fleet that PLA intelligence pointed towards as gathering near Earth. The Overmind had studied human defense patterns and concluded that they would make a final stand in the Martian space between themselves and their homeworld, and almost certainly base it on guerrilla warfare using the asteroid belt for cover. But the belt was deserted except for automated mining platforms and a few dispersed defense installations. The principal human fleet was absent. Scanning anomaly detected relayed a subordinate mind via the hegemony's shared consciousness. Varied energy signatures across the inner system, but no discernible fleet formations. The Overmind sifted through it with increasing anxiety. The humans were behaving irrationally once more, discarding good defense doctrine for what? The battle computer simulated 1,000,000 times, but no simulation made human conduct intelligible. The response was when the hegemony fleet arrived in Earth's orbital space and found themselves confronted with something far other than a concentrated defense. but rather something unprecedented within their experience of warfare. Each human ship, each station, each orbital platform had been deployed not for optimal defense effectiveness, but for optimal psychological effect. They formed a ring around Earth's 10,000 vessels of every size and class, from massive dreadnoughts to converted civilian freighters. Each ship broadcast the same message on all frequencies. Remember the unyielding. Remember Captain Chen. No surrender, no retreat, no quarter. It was glorious. It was mad. It was perfectly, totally human. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Indomitable, watching as the hegemony fleet approached Earth's defensive perimeter. The alien ships moved with their characteristic perfect precision. But she could detect something different in their formation and certainty, perhaps even hesitation. Signal from the flagship of the hegemony, her communications officer declared. They seek parley. Rodriguez's hope spiked before she quashed it. The hegemony didn't negotiate. They conquered. They wouldn't be asking for talks unless something had changed, something that made them question that the victory was inevitable. Put them through. The bridge speakers snapped on with the same robotically precise voice they had heard on Captain Chen's final transmission. Tension, human command. Authority. It's the hegemony overmind on the ship Eternal Dominion. Your resistance has been seen and evaluated. Additional combat makes no rational sense. Surrender immediately, and your species will be granted the privilege of incorporation into the hegemony. You refuse, and total extinction cannot be avoided. Rodriguez looked around her bridge crew men and women who had suicidally signed up to die for their homeworld, who armed themselves with welding equipment alongside their sidearms in case they had to strap themselves into their stations like Chen's crew had just done. They were waiting for her orders, depending on her to speak the entirety of humanity here. Hegemony over mind, she replied. This is Fleet Admiral Alina Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Force. I'll give you the same answer Captain Sarah Chen gave you over the unyielding. We don't negotiate. We don't negotiate. We don't run. We stand. We fight, and we make you pay for every human life you take. There was a moment's silence before the Overmind answered. Your situation is tactically hopeless. Our mathematics indicate extinction for the human race within 72 hours of the beginning of combat. Surrender is the rational course. Logic, Rodriguez said, is overrated. You've studied our transmissions, learned our languages, analyzed our tactics, but you've missed the most important thing about humanity. We don't fight because we can win. We fight because it's right. She keyed the fleet-wide channel, her voice carrying to every human ship in the solar system. All vessels implement the Chen Protocol. No surrender, no retreat, no quarter. Make them remember us. The Earth's battle started with a single shot. The firing of the Indomitable's main battery upon the flagship of the hegemony at maximum range. The plasma beam hit the extraterrestrial ship's shields and dissipated without causing harm. But it made a statement that echoed on both sides. The human race fought to the finish. What ensued was the most lopsided fight in history. The hegemony had guns that could shatter continents, shields that could survive stellar pounding, and communications that worked at the speed of thought. The human fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed across every measurable dimension. But they fought nonetheless. Ships that should have been vaporized in the opening exchange somehow kept fighting. Their crews welding themselves to their stations and operating weapon systems that ran on backup power and sheer determination. The Defiant lost its main guns. Her crew rigged the ship's reactor to overload and rammed it into a hegemony cruiser. When the Brave was cut in half by an energy beam, both halves continued fighting independently until they ran out of ammunition. The battle raged on for 6 days. The Earth space was a junkyard for human ships, their expense reckoned not in strategic victory, but the sheer fact that they had failed to yield. The hegemony was gaining, always without it, was gaining slowly, expensively, bloody. On the sixth day, when the final human dreadnought perished, battling within Earth's upper atmosphere, a singular event occurred. The hegemony over mind, correlating casualty reports and battle analyses, came to a decision that ran contrary to 500 years of successful domination. Humanity could not be defeated, not because they could not be killed. The overmind had worked out that human extinction was going to take around 48 hours continuous combat, but because their resistance had given rise to something new within hegemony consciousness, which had never been before. Doubt, the collective consciousness that had conquered half the galaxy, was battered for the first time. Every hegemony victory among humankind came at a cost that had risen above material losses. The refusal of the humans to yield their need to die on their feet. Their absolute commitment to opposition had assaulted the hegemony with a poison deadlier than a bomb. The knowledge some species would never fall. If humankind could resist, what could the conquered nations do? If human beings could fight insoluble chances armed with no more than stubbornness, what was the definition of power for the hegemony? If the crew of a single destroyer could turn the tide of galactic history by refusing to back down, what was the end for the absolute hegemony of the hegemony? The overmind reached a decision that would have been incomprehensible a week earlier. It opened communications with the few remaining human vessels. Attention, human command, authority. It's the hegemony overmind here. We offer ceasefire. Admiral Rodriguez, commanding from a heavily damaged orbital station that had somehow survived the battle, couldn't believe what she was hearing. Say again, hegemony command. We propose cessation of hostilities. Your species has demonstrated qualities that warrant preservation. The hegemony offers coexistence protocols. Rodriguez looked around the ruins of her command center. Half her personnel were dead, the others injured. Earth's orbital defense was gone. Her fleet was a straggle. On any rational count, humanity had been decisively beaten. So why was the hegemony providing peace? How do you intend? She inquired warily. Free and autonomous human space. Integration non-obligatory. No tribute imposed. Procedures for coexistence to be established. In return, human aggression towards hegemony territories cease. It was unprecedented. The hegemony had never offered terms to a defeated enemy, never acknowledged the right of another species to exist independently. Rodriguez felt tears streaming down her face as she realized what Captain Chen's sacrifice had accomplished. Why? She challenged. You have won. You could finish us within hours. The delay before the overmind's answer spanned the emptiness amidst the hissing of broken communications equipment and the faraway dying ships. Loss for humankind is unthinkable, the mechanical voice replied finally. Liquidation of humankind's. Biology is possible. Elimination of human resistance is not. Your species has demonstrated loss does not equal surrender. That creates difficulties. Rodriguez comprehended. Akski. The hegemony wasn't withdrawing because they could not win. They were withdrawing because victory over humankind was worthless if humankind would never concede. They had broken a core element within the hegemony's concept for conquest, added a variable outside the bounds for which their group consciousness was capable. The Chen Protocol, he said softly. State the term. Commander, Sarah, Chen, and crew of the destroyer unyielding. They taught you what we're capable of when we have nothing left to lose. Each and every human being that died opposing you died the same man frozen into their posts, refusing to yield, forcing you to cost us every victory. That's the Chen Protocol. That's us. The overmind worked on this data, running probability matrices and battle calculations that all came up with the same conclusion. Humanity was a new kind of war, and the perfect effectiveness of the hegemony couldn't overcome it. They could blast human ships, take human worlds, even wipe the species out completely. Yet they couldn't bring themselves to make the humans surrender. And if they didn't surrender, victory was nothing. Coexistence protocols are acceptable, the Overmind asked. Rodriguez looked upon the battle screen showing the few human ships still able for battle among the 230 hegemony ships able to reduce them to ashes on a whim. She remembered the million dead for the defense of their homes. The crews which had welded themselves into their consoles rather than abandon their positions. Captain Chen and the Unyielding's last strength transmission. We accept, she said. But understand, this isn't surrender. This is recognition that some fights are too important to lose, even when you can't win. The ceasefire began immediately. Crossed human space, the surviving ships silenced their guns, but remained at battle stations. It was going to take a while before trust could be established, if it could be established. The hegemony had proven capable of being reasonable, but they had also proven capable of glassing entire worlds, without a second's hesitation. But something essential had undergone a shift within the galaxy. The hegemony had, for the first time, faced a species they could not really dominate, could not assimilate into their collective mindset, could not treat as mere resources for gain. Humanity was still free neither for the reason that they were powerful enough to hold their ground, but for the fact that they were obstinate enough never to cease waging battle. The news spread through human space like wildfire. The war was over. But it hadn't ended in defeat or victory, it had ended in something unprecedented. The hegemony, the unstoppable force that had conquered half the galaxy, had blinked first. Not because they couldn't destroy humanity, but because destroying humanity wouldn't accomplish anything in the weeks that followed. As both sides began the delicate process of establishing peaceful coexistence, the story of the Unyielding became legend. Captain Sarah Chen and her crew were posthumously awarded every honor the Terran Defense Force could bestow. But more importantly, they were remembered for what they had accomplished in those final moments. They had shown an advanced alien civilization that some things were more important than survival. The Chen Protocol became doctrine not just for the military, but for humanity as a whole. When faced with impossible odds, when confronted with enemies too powerful to defeat, when standing at the edge of extinction, humans would remember the lesson of the Unyielding. Sometimes the most important victory comes not from winning the fight, but from refusing to lose it. Commander Alina Vasca's sister to the engineer who had died securing herself to her console aboard the Unyieldings, in the memorial chamber that had been created within Earth's orbital space, looking upon the thousands that had died within the initial interstellar war among humankind. The chamber was built with salvaged hull plating which had originated aboard the Unyielding, recovered within the wreckage field within the Kepler system, and brought back as a reminder of sacrifice and determination. They changed everything, she told the young cadets of the Navy who had come to offer their respects. Not with greater firepower or newer tactics, but with something the hegemony had never faced: the utter refusal to surrender. One of the cadets, just barely 18 and still wide-eyed with the enormity of what had occurred, responded, "But Commander, they all died. How's that a victory?" Vasca smiled, recalling her sister's final transmission, her voice firm even. As the ship fell apart around her, victories not surviving, cadet. Victories getting your sacrifice to matter. Alina and her crewmates didn't die, they invested us in a future. They made the galaxy understand that humanity prefers to burn rather than kneel. Outside the Chamber of Remembrance, the stars whirled in their celestial dance, and among them sailed ships flying the banners of two vastly dissimilar cultures learning to coexist within the same stellar neighborhood. The hegemony pursued their conquest into virgin parts of the galaxy, but they did it with a different appreciation for what resistance was. Humanity rebuilt their fleets and colony worlds, but they rebuilt with the realization that they had come within a hair's breadth of extinction and discovered something greater than the desire to survive. The desire to resist, the Unyielding, was lost, her crew scattered atoms drifting through the boundless emptiness of space. However, her heritage endured within every human being, obstinately refusing to succumb against hopelessly prohibitive odds. Within every ship sailing under her name and her spirit, within every person that remembered that oftentimes the greatest victory wasn't for triumphing, but for refusing always to relinquish the fight in the end. Captain Sarah Chen and her crew had accomplished something that military strategists would study for centuries. They had turned a massacre into a stalemate, a defeat into a draw, and a surrender into a revolution. They had shown that sometimes the most advanced technology in the galaxy couldn't overcome the simple human conviction that some things were worth dying for. The galaxy was huge, crowded with marvels and nightmares that no human could fathom. Yet somewhere within that vastness, amidst a junk field, once a single destroyer, the sound of rebellion still echoed among stars, a poignant reminder that however black the darkness, or however bleak the chances, there were always those ready to rise up and resist for what was good. The unyielding had lived true to her name in the most literal fashion imaginable. She had not given in, would never give in, could never give in. And within that refusal, she had spared not only humanity, but the ideal of resistance itself. So that for as long as humankind breathed among the stars, there was always someone to say no to tyranny, no matter the cost. That was the true victory, not the survival for the species, but the survival for the soul that made them worthy to survive in the first place. Decades later, when historians sought to account for the fact that a single destroyer had turned the tide of galactic history, they could cite factors of technology, tactics, and strategy. But they would overlook the true explanation for why the unyielding had succeeded when fleets had failed. It wasn't about weapons or shields or faster-than-light drives. It was about something much simpler and infinitely more powerful than human. Refusal to accept that some fights couldn't be won. Captain Chen and her crew had looked at impossible odds and decided that impossible simply meant it hadn't been done yet. In the memorial chamber, Commander Vasquez concluded her speech before the cadets and observed them exiting, faces serious and set. They would continue the tale, would recall the lesson when their hour of need arrived, and it would arrive, always did. The galaxy was a perilous place, and it had dangers that would challenge the mettle of humankind time and time again. But they would be prepared. They would recall the unyielding. They would recall Captain Chen. And when the moment for surrender or sacrifice came, for survival or principle, for the easy way or the just way, they would know what was the correct course. They would stand. They would fight. They would make their enemies pay for every victory, every defeat, every breath of their existence, because that was what it meant to be human, not the species that gave up when the odds were bad, but the species that made the odds irrelevant through sheer determination. The unyielding was gone, but she had left something behind, a legacy of defiance that would echo through the ages. A reminder that sometimes the smallest light could push back the greatest darkness, and that no matter how advanced or powerful the enemy, they could never defeat the human spirit. That was enough in the end. It had to be enough. It was all they had, and it was all they needed.